Okay, I got that. Thanks. I've never come to this meeting. Usually I am going to sleep at 8:30, so this is going to totally screw up my system. I recognize only Mark here, but I don't really know where to begin. Tom asked me to share. I've known Tom for the last 25 years. And so we've shared a lot over the years. And so when Tom asks me to do something, I usually say yes, not knowing what the hell I'm going to do when I say yes. So he threw out a couple of suggestions, and I chose the suggestion about transitions. So I look at the world, and when I work, or even in the nonprofit world, I usually say to people, look, there are facts, there are opinions, and there are beliefs. Can we just stick to the facts? And then we'll get to the opinions and beliefs. So the fact is, we all go through transitions every day. You wake up, you're going through a transition. If you don't wake up, you're going through a major transition. I have no idea what the hell that's going to be. But we all go through transitions. And I said to Tom, this is great because I get to look back and think about my life a bit and then kind of share it. So from here on out, it really is not about facts. It is about my beliefs and some opinions. And I say beliefs because if I look back at my life, I see my life from one perspective, my perspective. And what I see, the reality I see may not actually be the reality. I mean, all they have to do is spend, I now have like 12 grandchildren, and my kids are in their 50s, mid 50s. And we sit down and talk about them growing up. And what I thought happened is not what they thought happened. So I think it is really, you go back over your life and you say, wow, did I do that? Didn't I do that? So a lot of it is my beliefs. And so I will try and bring this all together somehow. I hope it makes sense. So in transitions, I look at transition and say, you're either conscious or unconscious when you're going through a transition. You either think about it and plan for it, or you go through the transition unconsciously, but you're going to go through the transition. Most of the transitions in my life were unconscious, and that's fine. I'm going through, the last couple of weeks, I've gone through a couple of my grandchildren's high school graduations. They're going through a major transition. Should they be conscious of what they're doing? There's no way in hell that an 18-year-old is going to be conscious about the transition into college. I mean, they're just partying and having a ball. And I did the same. Although it took me a little while to get out of high school. So let me go back. And because my life was colored by how I grew up and where I grew up. I grew up in, my parents were Sicilian immigrants. The very close society, New York and Queens. I mean, Queens, you had, the Italians on one block, the Irish on one block. It was very close. Sicilians are even more close. They never talk about anything. The old joke is, I married an Italian, but I'm Sicilian. Two different animals. I would say there was chaos in my house when I was growing up. I mean, that has been, for my sisters, pretty much all agreed there was a fair amount of chaos early on. My dad got sick when I was 13, so I went to work at 13, basically. Kept on school. He died when I was 15. I was I'm an experiential learner with an auditory learner. So in the late 40s and the 50s, they weren't looking at kids. They just said you were dumb. That's all. And that kind of carried on through my teenage years, except I was working all the time and going to high school. Got a lot of messages during those years that were not really positive. But what was positive is my experiential learning of how the hell to work hard, which carried me on, through all my life. And I look back and I think to myself, I learned so much from people that I worked with. I was probably the only white guy that was shining shoes on 6th Avenue for a black guy. But I learned more from Santos that stuck with me forever. So he was a cobbler on Avenue of Americas in New York. And guys would come in and the shoe shine was in the back of the store, and he would be up front doing his cobbling stuff. Guys would come in, sit down, and I shine their shoes. I think I got a nickel a shoe or something. And because I was 14, 15 years old, shining away, I wouldn't do the back of their shoes. They weren't going to look at them, and Santos would yell down, "Do the back of their shoes." A great goddamn lesson. If you're going to do a job, even though nobody sees it, do it right. And so that carried with me all my life, and still now it does. So there's a lot of good things that came out of that experience. But it was also an era of, I left. It was an era of you either went into service. If you got out of high school, you went to college. I wasn't going to college, and the draft was there, so I went in the Air Force, early 60s. Vietnam, it wasn't in combat. I was a medic. I was Aerovac. Lots of things happened in Aerovac as we took guys around the country. I was unconscious during all that. I really wasn't present for what's going on. We were good at what we did. I flashed back during this time when Tom said, what do you do? Something. I flashed back on taking guys that were burnt, from California down to Lackland. They would come in from Nam. These guys want to strike a frame. The burn unit was in San Antonio, and take them. All of a sudden, that flashed back to me. Never talked about it. Never talked about any of that stuff. But that was an era too, that when I got into business, my mentors were World War II guys. I worked with guys that came out of Korea. My mentor actually was a pilot, got shot down, was a prisoner of war in Germany. Never talked about it. Alcoholic, in and out of the program. Never talked about it. Years later, he walked out of a window on 5th Avenue. I was with a guy, I worked with a guy who was in Korea, had a mushed in face because, his position was overrun, and Chinese just stepped on his face, never talked about it. So that's how you grew up. You never talked about stuff. The Vietnam situation, those 60s, the early 70s were crazy. Guys came back, the difference between today and then was the guys wouldn't wear the uniform when they got out. You were not welcomed home. Nobody welcomed you for your service. Never talked about it. Nobody ever talked about shit. You would never share about anything. But that's how you grew up. You would, when I was 15, I remember standing outside the funeral home. in Corona, Queens, which was all Italian at the time. And the old guy came up to me and said, "Now you're the man of the family now." I think back and say, "Are you shitting me? 15 years old? I'm the man of the family?" But that's what I took with me. But all the other messages of not to share, not to do anything. Anyway. And it's not a sad life. I had a good life. I've had a good life. It's a better life today than it was then. I got married, had 5 kids. It was just what you did. Built a business. Transitions, unconsciously growing, doing what you had to do when you're at that age, trying to build the future. Thinking of what you had to do, take care of kids, just running like a bastard, and trying to be present. My wife was an amazing human being. We had 5 kids in school, and she was full-time at Harvard at Divinity School. And we had a plan. We had our plan. And the plan was I was going to build this business. And at 50, all the kids would have been out of college. She would have been working at some place in the world by that time. She certainly was out of Harvard Divinity at the time. And we were going to go on sabbatical. I was going to built the company so that it could be there without me. And we were going to go on sabbatical 6 months to a year. Well, the plan didn't work out. Another transition. She got cancer when she was 47. She died when she was 48. We spent that year going from Boston to Sloan Kettering in New York. And the last 2 months, we were really at our own house in Situate, Mass, because the end was near and she wanted to die in our house, which she did. And I spent that last 7 weeks just sitting there in the family room with her. Until she had her last breath. Another transition. I was not prepared for it. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to do shit. The kids were gone. I was living by myself in Situate, working in Boston, living in Situate, until somebody kicked me in the ass and said, you got to be shitting me. You're going down there every night by yourself. And of course I was drinking. So what else am I going to do? To get the hell out of there and get into Boston, which I did. I got an apartment in Boston. All of this I was unconscious, really. I was unconscious about what was going on. And all of my fears, all my insecurities, and it was all insecure because I couldn't talk to anybody. This insecurity was, on the outside, I had everything. The business was rocking and rolling. I then did a major deal with a major corporation, used their money to build one of their divisions, and living the life. Except that next 5 years, I just kept on drinking. I went to work. I didn't drink during the day, but the weekend binges were just dramatic. So I had a place down in Newport, so I could disappear down there. Nobody could see me. And that's a great place to drink. That lasted for about 5 years till I hit the bottom. And then, then I found AA. My gut is that some, if not all of you, are in the fellowship. So that was the major transition for me. Really, really understanding. Well, I came in thinking it was about not drinking. And that's what I did for the first number of years, not drink. Never really understood the depth and the breadth of what it allowed me to do. And that was ultimately to talk to another man about how I was feeling, about my anxiety, about my frustration. about how to live life. Tom was one of those guys that we talked about stuff. And I think over the years, it has fostered my ability to live a more conscious life. And I think there's anything that I can do or help somebody else do, in the program, out of the program, is help another man, especially, or boy, or child, to think about, how do we live consciously? How do we think about what we're doing? How do we think about who we are? It's I've gone to, interesting, the last couple of weeks, as I thought about this, I had lunch with a deal friend I've known for 40 years last week. He had retired, 78 years old. And he had a new address. And we sat down and had lunch. And I said, well, what's going on? You downsized, you got this house, and you had this condo in Hopkinton, you're on the board, and all of a sudden you got this, you're living in Ashland. What's happening? He said, oh, well, my wife is in Hopkinton, I'm in Ashland. It just stunned me, absolutely stunned me. And I was like, what do you say? What? He said, I worked my ass off through my whole career and just worked and worked. And then I retired and we were living together. And she couldn't let go of all the time I wasn't there. And it just became too much. And it was we were not happy. I was not happy. And I had to leave. We're still friends, but I had to leave. And I thought to myself, holy shit, 49 years of marriage, 78 years old. That to me is unconscious living. I have a friend that sold his business a number of years ago. He still can't let go of not being a CEO. I mean, it really is, it is. And it's painful. And we talk about it. And yeah, I can relate some to it. Because I felt that way in initial stages of letting go of something, when in these transitions, major transitions. I mean, how many guys I know observe who are married for like 24, 25 years, and then the kids leave home, and then the marriage falls apart. It's like, that's not uncommon. And I think to myself, can I help people think about being conscious in these transitions? I mean, because for me, again, this is an opinion, if I'm conscious about certain transitions, they're much easier. One of my avocations was sailing. I did a lot of sailing. And so a couple of weeks ago, I sold my sailboat. And everybody asked me, how does that feel? It feels fine. Why? Because I made that decision and thought about it a year and a half ago. And it was both intellectual. I think here's the other piece. It's both intellectual and emotional. I mean, intellectual piece of me said, look, man, you're 80 years old. You're out there by yourself most of the time. Running to the foredeck when the head sail gets fucked up is not a good plan. You're not as fast as you used to be. Another transition. So that was fine. A lot of my sailing was long distance stuff. And what people don't understand about long distance sailing is it is an endurance sport. I mean, if you're going 1,500 miles or doing transatlantics, it's an endurance sport. I mean, you're up for 3 hours, you're down for 6, you're up for 3, you're down for 6, and you're doing that for a month. That's an endurance sport. I don't do that shit anymore. Intellectually, I don't want to do it. And do I miss it? Not really. Are there great stories? Yes. Some of which when guys relate some of the stories, I think to myself, really, was I on that boat? Because not my reality of what happened. So I think making conscious decisions in everyday life sets me up for a much happier, more blissful life. But it is, I think that the important piece is intellectually, you can do that. Can you do it emotionally? All right, that the emotional piece. When I was working, when I run a company, we'd have these meetings, and if they were really hairy kind of decisions we have to make, we'd sit around and get there, and we'd come to some decision. And at the end of the night, I would say, how does that feel? How does that feel? And invariably, the one woman executive on his team would say, it doesn't feel right. And the guys would go, God damn it. And I would say, hey, we ain't going to do it. Let's come back tomorrow. And she couldn't articulate whether it felt right or not, why it didn't feel right. And so we'd come back the next day and she could articulate it, and then we'd work it out. And 99% of the time, no matter how complex that situation was and the decision we made, if we got the feeling matched up with the intellect, it worked out 99% of the time. If we went with the intellect without the feeling, it was going to be in a shitter a year from now. And those meetings you come back to and say, geez, didn't we talk about this last year? Yeah, because intellectually we made a decision, but emotionally we weren't there. So nobody really bought into it. So, so I say the decision-making, conscious, yes, conscious, intellectual, but also emotional. And sometimes that emotional piece, for me, I write a lot when shit comes down like that. I just went through something this week that was driving me nuts. I mean, it was a situation with one of the nonprofits I'm working with that it was like, I was ready to blow the goddamn thing up. And I went for a walk. I thought it was so much in my head. I wound up walking 11 miles because I was so fucking lost that I looked at my watch and I said, holy shit, it's 5.5 miles. I get 5.5 miles to get home now. And I still hadn't gotten to it, but I sat down and wrote some of the thoughts down. And then talked to another human being about it, another guy that I could talk to, not a deal guy, but a friend. And we came to what my sticking point was. Why was I having such a problem? It was not an intellectual problem. It was a feeling problem. And the feeling was one of integrity. And now the question was, how do I help this organization without walking away from it? Because those kids, the organization represents a lot of kids that need help. So how do I do that in a way that doesn't hurt anybody, and yet the children are ultimately going to benefit? Another exercise. Another exercise for me, writing is I got to get it down on a piece of paper and then look at it. And it felt right when I finally got it down on a piece of paper and then shared it with another person. So, my dog trick is to really intellectually think about stuff, then try and get to the emotion. Does it feel right? It felt right selling a boat. Really simple. It opens my life to a whole bunch of other things. Will I still sail? Yeah. I mean, I'm going up to Nova Scotia another couple of weeks and bring a boat down to Marblehead. Not a big deal. 2 days, maybe 3 days the most, so I'll get a little sailing in. But there'll be other guys on the boat who'll run to the foredeck when it gets fucked up. I won't. And so, I don't know, that's kind of, where I'm at. In thinking about transitions, and we will go through them. Some are bigger than others. Some transitions are not are forced upon us. A death in a family, if something happens, somebody gets sick, it's a transition. It's forced upon us. We can't think about it. We can't plan for it, but we can think about it and deal with it that way. And it took me 25 years, and then I got married again. Now that's a transition. I mean, you're 75, get married. It's a major transition after being single for 25 years. And then, okay, now I'm living with somebody full time. That's a transition. And many times we don't agree on things, but I don't say anything now. One of the things I tell myself is just shut up and do the fucking dishes. It's really simple, So that's it. Let me, this morning, one of the things we do is every Sunday morning, and Tom knows this, he's a big Mary Oliver fan. And, we 20 some odd years ago in Tuscany, we read some Mary Oliver together. But every Sunday morning, Mary and myself have coffee in bed and I read some Mary Oliver. And I just opened the book. And this is what I read this morning. It's called Leaves and Blossoms Along the Way. If you're John Muir, you want trees to live among. If you're Emily, a garden will do. Try and find the right place for yourself. If you can't find it, at least dream of it. When one is alone and lonely, the body gladly lingers in the wind or the rain, or splashes into the cold river, or pushes through the ice-crusted snow. Anything that touches. God or the gods are invisible, quite understandable. But holiness is visible entirely. Some words will never leave God's mouth, no matter how hard you listen. In all the works of Beethoven, you will not find a single lie. All important ideas must include trees, the mountains, the rivers. To understand many things, you must reach out of your own condition. For how many years did I wander slowly through the forest? What wonder and glory I would have missed had I ever been in a hurry. Beauty can both shout and whisper and still explains nothing. The point is, you are you, and that's for keeps. Thank you, gentlemen. I think I hit 8:30 on the nose without even planning it.